Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. Today we're just going to be doing some interesting sound design. I'm actually in a fairly special project. As you can see over here, there's a lot of different sequences going on, and there's just a kick and bass laid out over just 16 minutes over here. And what this is really kind of like my experimentation ground, where I experiment with interesting sound design techniques and tricks that I found, and I'm getting some crazy sounds out of that. As you can imagine, my neighbors really love me. Anyway, diving into that, I just want to do one of these like from scratch with you guys watching. So I'm just going to start off by whipping up a serum, and I want to do just a little bit of sound design in here. What I'm going to start out with is creating some kind of glitchy patch that is being triggered by different notes. The way that I like to work is usually with an arpeggio, so let's get that in here immediately. And I just have this preset set up to trigger random other and then 16 notes. That's kind of like the default setting that I have for my arpeggiators. With this particular patch, we're going to be triggering one note, so the random other doesn't really matter, but the 16 notes obviously do. So we're just going to put this down here at D sharp 0, as you can see. And now we have something like this. Let me actually quickly turn off the other groups here in this part so that we can hear it with a kick and bass as well. We get something like that. Let's create more interesting tone by using some of the tables in here that come from my tones pack. As you can imagine, a very nice starting point. But the interesting thing here that we can do is we can randomize the starting position over here with the note on random. And we can just use the full range of the modulation here so that we can make use of the entire table that is in here. Let's do some interest with the stereo width. Let's detune them. And as you can imagine, this could already be the basis for some kind of high-tech synth. I do want a little bit of a longer gate here so that the notes stay open a little bit longer. Let's go with like 95-ish. Some very cool stuff happening there. Let's add a bandpass to this. I think this is really cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign this to a macro, and I'm already going to configure that macro so that it shows up over here. This is fairly important because one of the things that I've learned while doing this kind of jamming session is that using a MIDI controller to like write in the jamming that you're doing with MIDI, as opposed to setting automation points in here, is really, really nice. Like I could go in here in the clip and just start making automation points like this, but this is very predictable and it's going to be very inhuman as you're not really playing it in. And you can imagine if I take an example like, for example, this synth over here, something that is played in with MIDI that looks like this is going to sound much more human. But we're not going to worry about that for now because I want to do some more sound designing stuff. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start with an audio effect track. And what I want to do is I want to adapt a cool idea that I saw in a Virtual Riot video. So just so that you can see the original video as well, this is the video that I got inspired by. Here, Virtual Riot is doing something very interesting with creating their own resonators out of an EQ. I'm not going to explain his technique, that is up to him. So if you are interested in that, make sure that you check out this video over here. What I'm basically going to do is I'm going to take that idea of his, that very big rack that he makes in that video. There's several of them, but they all basically have the same idea in terms of what they're doing to the sound. I'm going to take that very big rack, which is like a general purpose rack, and I'm basically going to rebuild it just for this specific use case. What I want to do is I want to take an EQ, filter out a specific frequency band, a specific frequency area here, like very, very tightly, even tighter than this, maybe just like this, like a very little spike here. Let me just group this as well so that we have another audio effect track that we can work with in here. Let me be able to show the change here. And then here we're going to name this tracker. What this is going to do is it's going to track the volume of this part over here. So what I want is I want an envelope follower. And now we can use the envelope of this particular frequency over here that we're selecting in here to map to an EQ boosting this specific frequency. So for that, we need another chain. Let's make that here. And then we'll just put an EQ in there. Let's just put that over here. And we'll just use that to boost this particular frequency over here with the gain. So our envelope follower that we just set up will basically be mapped to this gain over here. and that's just going to push it up when that part gets louder. Now we need to set these two specific keys, so we're all going to set them to D sharp. In fact, this one is already at D sharp, which is very, very interesting. I'm just going to kind of push them up here so that they just select this area over here. Now they're in E, I want them a little bit lower then. There's probably a better way of doing this now that I think of it. Let me just open up this here, and we can just get the frequency that we exactly want to map to. We'll start at D sharp over here, D sharp 2. And let me just fill that in here. I cannot paste in here, so I just have to copy that over. 77.7 over here. And then we need to do the same over here. So we can now map this to the gain over here. And then we can set this from 50% to 100% so that it will only go into the positive. It's not showing too much right now, but you can see it kind of bopping up a little bit every once in a while. That's because just in this low area, there's not a lot of stuff to detect. So let's duplicate this track. I'm going to go into the duplicate and I'm going to turn this off. And in here, I'm also going to group this. We'll also set the chains here. And let's just rename this to 1. We'll go into the tracker, rename this to 1 as well. And now I can duplicate this as well and then rename this to 2, just like we do in our tracker. So all we have to do now is go into the 2 and just set the next frequency here. So we go to 155.6 on both of them, 155.6. And just for convenience, I'm going to turn off all of these other bands, which we don't need. I'll do the same over here, just as a little bit of a cleanup. Now I can go 155.6 over here, and we can just go into the tracker, go to the second one and map this directly to the gain of this envelope 3 here. And actually, now that I think of it, we don't really need multiple chains here. Let's just do it with one EQ on the resonator bit and just have multiple tracker instances. So because we have 8 bands, we can make 8 trackers here and we can just do 8 octaves of D sharp. So what I'm going to do is in the 1, I'm going to set this all to the same shape here, all to the peak shape. And we'll just map tracker 1 to the very first EQ point here. So we just go to the gain over here, which means that this frequency will be 77.7, which is the frequency we set before. And this means that we have now our first resonator over here in frequency number 1. Again, Q is going to go all the way up. We're making resonators here, so we want that very nice resonant tone. I'm just going to do that for all of them. And then I'll quickly make all of the trackers and map everything so that I can skip that part so that you don't have to watch me do the same thing over and over again. So I've set up all 8 of the resonating peaks that I want over here. As you can see, they're all reacting to the audio coming in. But we're not really getting the effect yet. So what I want to do is I want to assign some macros over here. Let's first go into the different trackers and assign these all to macro 1, these gains over here. Then we map this to our main macro. Now we have this over here and I can just call this something like sensitivity. It's a little bit ugly on there with the 2 lines there. Amount is maybe better. But now we should see, as we're turning up the amount here, that the reactions should be more and more and more. Now what would be cool is to just get the resonating part of the sound. So in order to do that, I'm going to group this entire thing and I'm going to subtract it using the null test that you can do. So what that essentially means is that we get the whole chain and then we remove the original from it. In order to do that, we just phase invert the signal. So we just put on a utility and revert these two. And without any of the effect, we should hear anything. Now we can hear the resonances. And with the amount so down, you can see that the EQ isn't really doing a lot, so we don't get a lot of those resonances out there. Now, one final thing that I would like to do is to take all of these Q values and set them to a macro as well. So let's map this to macro 2 here. We just want to make sure that they go from the lowest possible value to the highest possible value, like this. And now we turn off the mapping. And now we have resonance control over all of the bands that we have on here. As you can hear, in terms of dynamics, our sound is very, very dynamic. Sometimes it's very, very quiet, and sometimes it's actually clipping. So we do need to fix that. I'm going to do that with a simple OTT that should take care of everything. Just going to boost the amount of post gain a little bit, and then we'll add a saturator for the final clipping stage. And just volume balance it like this. Let's set this final macro over here, so we can call this Q. And now I make this white so I know that this is also taken. And now we have 3 parameters that we can control within our patch. And you can hear that we can use the Q factor over here to set the kind of harmonicness of the sound. And overall, this is the amount of sound that's going to come through because we are now subtracting it with the original. I do want to do something over here though. In the tracker, I want to set the minimum amount of gain that we can get to -infinity over here. So now this goes from -infinity, where we should not get any sound. None of the trackers are activating, so this channel is going to have the same signal going through it as this channel, just because nothing is activating and therefore none of these EQ points are moving, and therefore you get a perfect null. I know it's starting to become a little bit complex, but I'm just very, very inspired with what Virtual Riot was doing, and that was also very, very complex. So I want to keep in the same vein. Next up, I do want to do some other sound design things over here. The main one that I liked is the Blue Glitch. This is a favorite plugin of mine, especially when doing very complex, glitchy kind of things. Obviously, as a glitch plugin, that's what it's designed for. And I'm just going to configure the master mix here so that we have something that we can later work with as well. But you can hear that this is just there to really mess up the sound. So now we get to the most interesting bit, and that's where I can start to jam out with some of the controls on my MIDI controller. So first we have to assign them. Let's do that here. We're going to assign the macro, which is controlling the filter cutoff. We're going to assign the amount here. We're going to assign the Q here. And then finally, we're going to assign the glitch amount over here. So the way that I like to do this is I like to record an audio. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a track and I'm going to record the output from here. And we're just going to be able to loop this. And we should be able to record as well as jam out with some of the parameters over here. I do like to have this track selected and to stop showing all of this stuff so that I can focus on all of the parameters that we have on here. I'm just going to all set them to the lowest default value, as you can see. This one is working on the macro. This one is working on the amount. This slider that I have over here is working on the Q. And then finally, we have the output mix of the glitch effect. So let's start recording and see if we can find some interesting sounds. So this is what we ended up recording. Now I have just one big file that I can use. And what I've been doing is actually in my sample packs, I've been working on like a jam session sample pack. The idea for this is that this is going to be part of a different video in which I'm going to show you how you can use all of these samples to actually build up a track and like arrange different synths in kind of like a high-tech style. As you guys know, I'm still working on a high-tech EP. And this is obviously going to come in handy when I'm making another track for that. So eventually all of these jam sessions are going to be available for Patreon supporters. So for now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drag them in there. And what I think is the best way of working with this kind of stuff is that you do the same, in that you're creating a folder where you have these very, very long recorded files, and you just give them names like this, which don't really describe the sound. You want to be very, very abstract so that you don't exactly know what's in the files, and you just have to open it up and search for something good in order to find the sound that you're after. And then once you have like 10 or maybe 20 of these different like little jam sessions recorded into audio files, you can just go ahead and build a track out of all of the little snippets that you can cut from that. But that's hopefully going to be a video for another day. For now, I'm going to end it here. One final thing that I want to say is that if you want to use the rack that we just made, this rack over here with the resonator and the tracker and all of that stuff in there, that's also going to be on my Patreon page. So make sure to check out the link in the description and sign up for my Patreon page to get access to that, as well as other benefits like early access to my videos, priority in feedback streams, discount codes for my Gumroad products, and many, many more benefits. But that's going to be it for now. I hope you enjoyed this little sound design session that I did, and that some of the techniques that I've shown in here are useful for you. If you did enjoy, make sure to like and subscribe, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.
It's impossible to